Welcome. Today's story takes you to a cadet center on the Orion Spur, where status is everything and kindness is treated like a weakness. Evan Rook arrives with an Earth patch that makes him an easy joke until one training module turns a routine day into something no one can laugh off. If you have ever been underestimated, stay with him. Let's begin. Day 1 at the Orion Spur Combined Cadet Center began with a joke aimed at Evan Rook, and he heard it before he even learned the rules. A tall cadet with skin like polished basalt leaned in, eyes bright with amusement. "Earth," he said, pronouncing it like a relic. "Do you people still boil water for entertainment?" Evan kept his face calm and let the moment pass, because giving them a reaction was the cheapest currency in the room. He answered like he had all the time in the galaxy. "I only do it for special occasions," Evan said. "Like meeting new friends." A few cadets snorted, and the sound was not friendly. Evan stood in the last row by choice, where nobody stared too long. The parade floor outside the cadet hall was glossy enough to reflect your mistakes, and it reflected Evan's posture with cruel honesty. The Earth patch on his sleeve looked like a punchline to them. Across the line, Sanave watched with a distant expression, like she was reading an invisible checklist. Her uniform was immaculate, her posture perfect, and a medical trainee badge sat under her cadet stripe. The instructor for morning formation, Sergeant Major Corandax, stepped onto the platform with a presence that turned air into order. His species had too many joints, and he used them like punctuation. "Cadets," Dax said, "today you train with a new module, and if you break it, I feed you the invoice." Silence held, then a few careful chuckles rose and died. Dax stared until even the last chuckle choked out. "You will be assigned in skill-balance squads," he said. "Balance does not mean fair. It means I can blame you equally." A drone floated by with a roster on its screen, and names flashed in quick, indifferent bursts. Evan waited for the usual, because the usual always arrived on time. "Cadet Evan Rook," the drone said. "Squad 9. Somebody laughed out loud, bright and sharp, and Squad 9 was where the strays went. The ones with bad scores, bad gear, bad attitudes, or bad origins ended up there, and everyone knew it. Evan did not flinch, because flinching was free entertainment, and he had run out of free things years ago. He kept his breathing steady anyway. Rel Vargo, the cadet prefect, moved through the rows like he owned the air. His uniform had extra trim, which was how the center spoke without writing anything down. He stopped in front of Evan and smiled like a polite threat. His voice stayed smooth, because cruelty here wore manners. "Rook," Vargo said, "try not to embarrass the facility. Maintenance is tired of cleaning up after Earth improvisation." Evan smiled lightly, as if none of this mattered, and that was the first kind of armor he could afford. He kept his tone flat, polite, and unbroken. "I will keep my improvisation inside approved zones," Evan said. Vargo blinked once, annoyed that Evan sounded educated, and leaned closer so only Evan could hear. The words came out like a lesson dressed as a whisper. "You're going to learn something here," Vargo said. "Your planet is not poor. Your planet is irrelevant." Evan looked past him at the cafeteria doors sliding open, because the day was moving on and the center did not care about anyone's feelings. He answered without raising his voice. "Maybe," Evan said, "but irrelevant things still trip you if you do not watch your step." Vargo straightened, offended in a way that could not be reported, and walked off, smiling. Evan watched the smile go and felt the warning inside it, quiet and patient. 2 hours later, the cafeteria was a controlled riot of trays, languages, and unspoken rules. The station's outer ring curved beyond the windows like a reminder of power that never needed a shout. The richest species sat closest to the windows where the view looked expensive. The mid-tier cadets sat in the middle, and the outcasts sat near the recycling chute. The air near the chute was louder, and nobody had to pretend. Evan carried a tray with plain protein and a cup of lukewarm broth. It looked like the kind of meal you ate to survive, not to brag. He sat at the outcast table where a few seats were already taken. Someone slid a tray in beside him with no smile and no apology. "Sanafe," sat down like a fact. Evan raised his brows, because the move was strange and the room noticed strange things. He kept his voice light anyway. "Lost your way?" Evan asked. Sanaa looked at his meal instead of his face, and her calm had edges. She spoke like she was filing data. "Your menu choice is statistically efficient," Sanaa said. "I wanted to see if you were doing it on purpose." Evan gave a soft laugh because laughing cost less than thinking about why she was here. He tilted his head, just enough to admit pride without offering it. "On purpose," Evan said, with a small side of pride. A cadet across the aisle scoffed loudly, basalt skin again, and the insult was delivered like a public service. Evan turned his head slightly and kept his tone level. "He eats like that because he cannot afford taste," the cadet said. "I can afford taste," Evan said. "I just learned not to buy it from people who overcharge." That earned more snorts, but the edge softened, and the crowd moved on to the next easy target. Even Sanaa's mouth twitched, just barely, before she smoothed it away. Then the overhead speaker chimed, and the voice had the flat cheer of official trouble. A nearby console displayed a line that read, "Training module heliograph is now active. Squad 9 report to Base 7. Sanaa stood smooth and precise, like she had been called by design. She paused as if reconsidering, then kept her eyes on Evan. "Good luck," Sanaa said. "Try not to be entertaining in a way that requires my services." Evan watched her go and wondered why she sat with him at all. Maybe she was curious, maybe she was careful, or maybe she was tired of watching cruelty pretend to be culture. Base 7 smelled like ozone and cold plastic, and the air tasted like clean metal. The heliograph module sat in the center, a steel dome surrounded by rails and sensor pylons. A ring of technicians watched from behind glass, and one of them stood with a tablet and an unreadable face. Her badge read Curriculum Architect Juno Slate, and Evan felt her eyes before he understood her role. Squad 9 assembled, and Evan counted faces the way you counted exits. Rel Vargo stood with them, even though he could have watched from safety, and that meant he wanted to be seen. Sergeant Major Dax clapped once, sharp enough to reset the room. His voice carried like a tool you did not argue with. "Module heliograph is a mixed environment scenario," Dax said. "Gravity shift, visibility loss, and hostile terrain behavior. Objective is retrieval and extraction," Dax continued. "You will not succeed by being brave. You will succeed by being boring." Vargo smirked like boring was beneath him, and Evan tightened his straps without making a show of it. He tried not to think about the word supposed, because supposed was how people got hurt in clean buildings. The dome opened like a mouth and exposed a corridor of dim light. Textured floor panels waited under their boots like a quiet gamble. A training drone hovered and projected a map that blurred at the edges, then steadied just long enough to be believed. Its voice stayed neutral, because neutrality was how the center hid intent. "Your target is a data core," the drone said. "Retrieve and return, and if you lose it, you repeat." They stepped in, and the door sealed behind them with a clean click. The first minute was normal, and normal felt like a gift. Breath, footfalls, mild tension, and the hum of machinery filled the corridor. Evan let himself believe the module would behave, just long enough for the belief to become dangerous. Then the floor lurched, and gravity shifted sideways just enough to make the world feel dishonest. A cadet stumbled, another laughed too loudly, and the lights pulsed as the hum rose like a giant machine waking up. Evan heard a crack under the hum, and it did not sound like training. He lifted his voice once, plain and clear. "Hold," Evan said. Nobody listened, and the squad surged forward like momentum was a plan. A panel ahead flashed, then dropped. The floor section fell away into a maintenance shaft that should have been sealed. A cadet named Valentir stepped onto it without seeing the seam. Valen vanished, and the scream was short. The impact that followed was too heavy to be a simulation. Evan moved before he thought and dove forward, because thinking would have been late. He caught Valen's wrist as the cadet dangled over the drop, legs kicking. The edge cut into Evan's forearm, and something sharp bit through his sleeve. He felt heat, then cold, then the fast rush of real blood. "Pull," now Evan barked. Two squad mates grabbed Valen's shoulders and yanked him back on his solid floor. Valen rolled, gasping, eyes wide, alive. Evan looked down at his arm, and blood ran fast because the cut did not care about pride. The corridor tilted again, and another panel flickered as if the module was deciding what to break next. A second gap opened behind them, and a cadet slipped into the wall hard. Sergeant Major Dax's voice came through an internal speaker, suddenly sharp. "Stop movement, stabilize, medical response is inbound," Dax said. Vargo stared at Evan's arm, then at the gap, then back at Evan, and his expression held ugly satisfaction. Evan tried to breathe steady as his vision narrowed at the edges because pain was an old acquaintance, but this was his body leaking out. "Sit," a squad mate said. Evan tried, but his knees argued, and the corridor felt like it was drifting away from him. The door at the far end burst open, and a medical team rushed in. The equipment looked too polished for Squad 9, and that alone made Evan uneasy. Sanaa Vey was with them, and her eyes met Evan's for half a second before she looked away and became pure focus. "Pressure," Sanaa said. "Now." A medical tech pressed a seal pad over the wound, and another snapped a band tight. Evan felt the world tilt from inside, like a switch had been thrown in his chest. Sanaa reached into a case and pulled out a compact pouch with a label Evan could not read. She hesitated for a fraction, then committed, and that hesitation mattered more than the speed that followed. "Borrow blood pack," Sanaa said. "Emergency substitute, authorized for acute loss." Vargo leaned in, intrigued, and the curiosity in his face looked expensive. Sanaa did not look at him, not even once. "That is expensive," Vargo said. "On him." "On anyone," Sanaa said. She connected the pack with fast, practice motions, and Evan watched her hands because it was easier than watching his blood. He did not feel a miracle, only a slow return of shape. The ringing softened, and the cold in his fingers backed off. He took a breath that went all the way down, and Sanaa's eyes lifted sharp. "Stay with me," Sanaa said. "I was planning on it," Evan said. "Do not be funny," Sanaa said. "Not yet." The corridor lights steadied, and the hum lowered like a reluctant apology. Behind the glass, Juno Slate watched with a calm face, and her gaze did not flinch at suffering. Evan did not like being a result, and the thought stayed with him like grit under a bandage. Even as the med team moved him, he felt those eyes measuring what he became. 2 hours later, Evan lay in a recovery bay under a blanket that smelled like new fabric. A monitor hovered nearby and displayed simple curves and readouts. Evan did not try to interpret them, because too much data could become panic. Sanaa stood at the foot of the bed with her hand still, like stillness was a choice she had to keep making. "You should not have reached," Sanaa said. "If I had not reached, he would have fallen," Evan said. "You could have died," Sanaa said. "I almost did," Evan said. Silence settled, not awkward and not friendly, just real. Sanaa glanced toward the door as if she could already hear it coming. "They will ask questions," Sanaa said. "They will decide you caused it." Evan gave a tired laugh, and it came out smaller than he meant. He stared at the bandaged arm like it belonged to somebody else. "That would be efficient," Evan said. "Blame the poor cadet and fix nothing." Sanaa's eyes flashed with anger under control, and Evan saw how practiced that control was. Her voice stayed steady, but the promise in it carried weight. "I will testify," Sanaa said. Evan watched her face and saw she meant it, and he also saw what meaning would cost her. He asked the question that mattered, because he needed to know how alone he was. "What?" Evan asked. "You barely know me." "I know what I saw," Sanaa said, "and I am tired of watching people turn cruelty into policy." A soft knock came at the door, and it slid open with inspection-friendly quiet. Provost Halden PRYX entered with 2 aides and a smile warm enough to pass review. "Cadet Rook," PRYX said, "how fortunate you survived our module." Evan did not like the word fortunate, because it sounded like a leash, and PRYX used words the way other people use restraints. PRYX's eyes moved to Sanaa with calm ownership. "Cadet Vey," PRYX said, "your quick action is noted." "I did my duty," Sanaa said. "And now," PRYX said, "we will determine whose duty failed." Evan felt something shift in his chest that was not fear, and the feeling unsettled him because it arrived without his permission. His heart beat once, harder, as if it heard, failed, and refused. For hours later, Evan stood outside a hearing room that smelled like polished stone. Recycled air hummed through vents that never quite cooled, and the building felt too clean to be kind. The bandage under his uniform itched, and his arm throbbed in a steady rhythm. He could feel the borrowed blood pack inside him in a vague way, like the memory of someone else's strength. Vargo waited nearby, arms folded, pleased, as if injury was proof of order. His voice carried just far enough for bystanders to hear. "You are going to be famous," Vargo said. "Earth Cadet breaks a module and drains resources." "Earth Cadet proves Earth is a liability," Vargo added. Evan looked at him without heat, because heat was what they wanted. He kept the words simple and let them cut anyway. "Or Earth Cadet exposes the fact you like a system that hurts people," Evan said. "It is not personal," Vargo said. "It is hierarchy." "Hierarchy is always personal," Evan said. "It is just laziness with paperwork." The door opened, and an aide gestured them in with a smile that meant nothing. Inside, Provost PRYX sat at a long table under bright lights. Juno Slate sat to his right with hands folded neatly, and her eyes rested on Evan like a scientist watching a specimen that would not stop moving. On PRYX's left sat a woman with a bright insignia and an expensive smile. Consortium patron Lyra Quill leaned forward with open interest, and the room felt suddenly sponsored. Evan did not know her name then, but he knew the type. "Cadet Rook," Lyra said, "I am so relieved you are recovering." "I represent a consortium that supports cadet safety innovation," Lyra added. "We fund systems like your substitute blood pack." Evan's stomach tightened as the trap formed clean and polite. Provost PRYX smiled like a host who loved accidents. "We are grateful for that support," PRYX said, "especially when accidents happen." Juno Slate spoke, voice smooth and precise, like the words were already formatted. Evan heard the confidence of someone who could call harm acceptable. "The module. Performed within acceptable parameters," Juno said. "The failure appears localized to behavior under stress." PRYX nodded, as if they discussed a broken chair, not a nearly dead cadet. He folded his hands, then delivered the accusation like a question. "Evan Rook," PRYX said, "why did you deviate from your squad's movement protocol?" "Because someone was falling," Evan said. "Heroism is admirable," PRYX said, "but it can destabilize training." Evan felt heat creep up his neck, and his heart beat harder, and he hated that his body listened to the room like it was a threat. He breathed slowly, because he could not afford to let the new engine rev. Lyra smiled gently, like mercy with a price tag. The offer sounded like help, but it smelled like ownership. "If your body is responding unusually to the borrowed blood pack, we can help you," Lyra said. "We can monitor your recovery and protect you from misunderstandings." Sanaa stood at the back of the room by order, silent and sharp-eyed. Evan met her gaze for a moment, then faced PRYX again. "I did not break your module," Evan said. "Your module broke your cadet." PRYX's smile stayed, but his eyes cooled. The warning came out soft, because softness here was power. "Careful," PRYX said. "I'm being careful," Evan said. "I am learning from the best." That night, Evan returned to Squad 9 quarters with a stack of restriction notices, neatly printed and sealed. The neatness made them feel final, like punishment designed to look civilized. He read them twice, because the details were petty enough to be real. They did not punish him with force. They punished him with slow inconvenience. Vargo leaned against Evan's doorframe like he belonged there. His tone carried delight dressed as fairness. "Welcome to fairness," Vargo said. Evan looked at the notices and kept his voice even, because the room was listening. He asked the question that exposed the speed of the system. "How did you do this so fast?" Evan asked. "I did not do anything," Vargo said. "The system did what it always does. It protects itself." Evan stepped inside, and the quarters felt smaller than before, crowded with resentment and thin walls. He set the notices on his bunk and flexed his injured hand. The muscles felt different, like they waited for a signal that never came. A squad mate whispered nearby, nervous and young in the eyes. "They say you're dangerous now," the cadet said. Evan turned slowly, because turning fast would look like proof. He kept his face neutral and asked for the source. "Who says?" Evan asked. "Everyone who benefits if you are," the cadet said. Evan sat on the thin mattress and listened to his breathing, steadying himself like a machine with loose bolts. The station's hum was constant and indifferent, and he could feel the after effect in his blood. It was not magic, it was altered readiness, the kind your body learned when danger became real. 2 doors down, someone laughed in a way that meant trouble was planning itself. Evan opened his eyes and kept his voice low, like a promise he did not want to make but could not avoid. He spoke to the empty air as if it could hear him. "All right," Evan murmured. "Let us see how polite evil can get." The next morning, Sergeant Major Dax made Squad 9 run a track course with gravity shifts tuned to humiliation. Other squads watched from the railings like spectators at a sport. Evan kept pace and did not show anything extra, because extra was a confession here. Vargo jogged beside him, breathing easy, making sure everyone saw it. "Do you miss Earth?" Vargo asked loudly. "The mud, the poverty, the charming lack of orbital infrastructure?" Vargo added. Evan did not answer and focused on form, because form was a kind of refusal. Then a gravity pulse hit wrong, and the floor jerked. A cadet ahead stumbled toward the edge of a raised platform. The cadet windmilled, feet slipping, headed for a hard fall. Evan moved without thought, and his body did not ask permission. Heat surged through his chest, and his legs fired like they belonged to someone else. He covered the distance too fast, grabbed the harness, and hauled the cadet back. For half a second, the world slowed around him, and fine dust floated like tiny moons. Then time snapped back, and Evan's arm trembled as his vision blurred. His stomach rolled like the station had tilted, and the strength drained as quickly as it arrived. "You are fast," the cadet said. "Only when it counts," Evan said. Sergeant Major Dax stepped closer, eyes narrowed, and the question was not curiosity. It was an inventory check. "What was that?" Dax asked. "Reflex," Evan said. "Adrenaline." Dax watched him too long, then looked toward the observation booth. Behind glass, Juno Slate was there again, watching like she expected the moment. 2 hours later, Evan sat on a bench outside the training bay, and his hands shook slightly. The tremor felt like debt, like his body had taken a loan from fear. Sanave approached and sat down beside him, leaving a respectful gap. Her voice stayed calm, but the meaning was sharp. "You triggered again," Sanaa said. "I did not choose it," Evan said. Sanaa held his gaze, calm and exact, then chose plain words like a gift she hated giving. She kept her tone clinical, then softened it just enough to be human. "Your system is coupling threat perception to performance output," Sanaa said. "In plain words, you get stronger when you're scared." Evan gave a dry laugh that tasted wrong, because the truth did not feel heroic. He stared at his hands like they belonged to someone else. "That is the least poetic thing I have ever heard," Evan said. "It is also dangerous," Sanaa said. "If you chase the strength, you will chase danger." Evan looked at her, and the tiredness in his face stayed honest. He asked the question that made the answer hurt. "And if I avoid danger?" Evan asked. Sanaa hesitated, and that hesitation mattered. Her voice stayed steady, but the warning in it landed hard. "Your body may stop trusting you," Sanaa said. "It may withhold when you need it, or fire at the wrong time." Evan exhaled slowly, because the idea made him feel trapped inside his own skin. He tried to make it a joke, but the joke came out thin. "So my reward for not dying is a nervous system with opinions?" Evan asked. "Yes," Sanaa said. "And your reward for being funny is my professional irritation." Evan turned toward her, more serious now, and let the humor go. He asked what he had been holding back since the corridor. "Why are you helping me?" Evan asked. Sanaa looked away at cadets running drills like nothing mattered, then returned her gaze without flinching. Her answer came out like a confession that refused to sound dramatic. "Because I made a choice in that corridor," Sanaa said. "And choices have consequences." Evan nodded once, because he understood that kind of consequence. He offered the only welcome he had. "Welcome to Squad 9, Evan said. Sanaa did not smile, but she stayed, and staying was louder than smiling. Evan felt that in a way he did not want to need. That afternoon, Lyra Quill arrived at Evan's quarters with a small escort. She wore a visitor badge and expensive confidence, and she stepped inside as if the room welcomed her. "Cadet Rook," Lyra said. "How is your recovery?" Evan stayed standing and did not offer his bunk. He kept his voice plain, because plain was harder to twist. "I'm alive," Evan said. Lyra laughed softly, like he told a charming story. She gestured as if she was presenting opportunity, not pressure. "Alive is a good start," Lyra said. "I am here to offer you protection, privacy, and resources." Lyra gestured to a slim case, and the object looked too small for what it promised. Her tone stayed warm, because warmth made people sign. "Our consortium can provide a monitoring patch," Lyra said. "It is standard in high-risk rehabilitation and ensures stability." Evan stared at the case, then looked at her like he could see the contract behind her teeth. He asked the only honest question. "And what do you get?" Evan asked. "Safety," Lyra said. "Data that improves future packs, so no cadet suffers again." Evan looked at the escort and recognized the recovery team insignias, and the recognition made his stomach tighten. He thought of Juno Slate's gaze and the restriction notices, and he heard the clean click of traps forming. "My body is not a grant proposal," Evan said. Lyra's smile did not break, it only cooled. Her words stayed polite, but the message stopped pretending. "Your body is already in the system," Lyra said. "The question is who makes sure it is treated well." Evan took a slow breath, because anger would feed them and fear would power them. He kept his voice calm, like stone that had learned patience. "I do not sign anything without counsel," Evan said. "Counsel is available through the provost," Lyra said. "We can arrange it quickly." "Then arrange it," Evan said, "and leave my room." Lyra paused, then laughed, because she could not resist turning defiance into a charming anecdote. She walked out still smiling, and the door slid shut. Sanaa appeared in the doorway, as if she followed a feeling she could not ignore. Lyra saw her and brightened too quickly, like she had been waiting for a witness. "Cadet Vey," Lyra said. "Perfect, you can reassure him. This is for his benefit." Sanaa's eyes narrowed into focus, and the question came out like a scalpel. She did not look at the case, she looked at the terms. "What are the terms?" Sanaa asked. "Standard," Lyra said. "Consent, cooperation, and compliance." Evan felt his heart beat harder, and his body read danger through perfume and paperwork. Sanaa watched him once, then looked back at Lyra with a steadiness that did not bend. Sanaa did not argue after Lyra left, because argument would waste time. She spoke the truth cleanly, and Evan felt it settle in his bones. "They are not offering help," Sanaa said. "They are claiming you." "I know," Evan said. "And the other side is claiming I am a problem." Sanaa nodded once, simple and grim. She made it plain enough for survival. "Two hunters," Sanaa said. Evan stared at his trembling hands and chose his words carefully because the choice mattered now. His voice stayed low, but the plan inside it was real. "Then I need to learn how to walk without bleeding," Evan said, "and how to fight without looking like I am fighting." Sanaa did not argue, which was its own agreement. Evan felt the room tighten around them like a quiet oath. 2 days later, Provost PRYX called a public review in the Central Forum, and everyone knew it was theater. Evan stood in the center circle, uniform crisp, bandage hidden, and the crowd watched like it was entertainment. Vardo stood to one side, eager, and Sanaa stood behind a line with her jaw tight. PRYX's voice carried with smooth authority, like the truth could be shaped by tone. "Cadets," PRYX said, "we train to protect the coalition. We cannot protect anything if we cannot trust our processes," PRYX added. "This cadet deviated in a way that resulted in a medical emergency, and we will determine if that deviation indicates unfitness." Evan kept his face neutral as his body buzzed at the attention. Attention was not danger, but his system did not know that yet. Juno Slate stepped forward with a tablet, and the data in her hands looked like a verdict waiting for a signature. Her voice stayed gentle, because gentle made blame feels scientific. Our module telemetry indicates unscheduled force output, Juno said. Cadet Rook demonstrated unusual acceleration during a gravity shift. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, hungry and nervous. Vargo raised his voice, eager to label the unknown. Unnatural, Vargo said. Earth improvisation, he is unstable. Evan looked at Vargo and kept his tone steady, because steady was the only power he could keep. He let the words land without heat. Unnatural is a word people use when they do not understand, Evan said, or when they want to be afraid on purpose. The crowd quieted, and PRYX lifted a hand to make the room obey. His smile stayed calm, because control always wore calm. Cadet Rook, PRYX said, "Do you claim the borrowed blood pack changed you?" Evan heard the trap click shut, and he hated how clean it sounded. He chose the only answer that did not feed either side. It saved me, Evan said. Anything after that is between my body and your medical staff. Lyra Quill appeared at the edge of the forum like she belonged there, as she smiled at the crowd like a benefactor. Her voice carried the confidence of someone who bought outcomes. It is precisely because we care about cadet welfare that we propose enhanced monitoring for Cadet Rook, Lyra said. Sanaa stepped forward, breaking protocol, and the room inhaled as one. PRYX's eyes sharpened into warning, because disobedience threatened the script. He is not a product, Sanaa said. Cadet Vey, PRYX said, return to your line. Sanaa did not move and did not blink, and Evan felt a quiet shock of gratitude he did not ask for. Her voice stayed clear and bright, because clarity was its own weapon. You are turning an accident into an opportunity, Sanaa said. For control. PRYX kept his smile calm and answered like he was teaching children. The phrase was smooth enough to sound reasonable. Control is safety, PRYX said. Evan felt heat surge behind his ribs as his system offered power. He forced himself to relax and stay boring, because boring denied them the story they wanted. Let me make it simple, Evan said. Your module had a fault, a cadet almost died, I acted, I bled, I lived. If you punish that, you teach everyone here to watch people fall, Evan added. A hush settled, heavy and clear, and for a moment the room sounded like a conscience trying to. Wake up. PRYX nodded slowly like he considered it, then turned the moment into paperwork. Your moral statement is noted, PRYX said. Now we proceed with evaluation. That night, Evan found a notice on his bunk requiring a private evaluation in Bay 7 at an hour when corridors were quiet. There was no signature, only a seal, and seals were how threats pretended to be policy. Sanaa met him in the hallway with tight breath, like she had been waiting for the exact moment the trap sprang. Her voice came out urgent, but controlled. Do not go alone, Sanaa said. I do not have a choice, Evan said. You always have a choice, Sanaa said. Sometimes the choice is what you are willing to lose. Evan studied her face and asked what mattered, because he needed to know if she was real or just brave for a minute. His voice stayed soft, but the question held weight. What are you willing to lose? Evan asked. Sanaa held his gaze and answered without drama, and that lack of drama made it dangerous. The truth sounded like a door closing behind her. A future that depends on silence, Sanaa said. Evan felt something loosen in his chest, not romance, but respect that could survive the morning. He nodded once and made the decision plain. Then come with me, Evan said. Sanaa nodded once, and they moved through corridors glowing station blue, breathing recycled air that tasted like metal. Bay 7 was quiet, too quiet, and the dome stood waiting like a patient predator. Inside, the corridor was dark, lit only by emergency strips. A figure stepped out of the shadows with no smile and a uniform too crisp to be accidental. Cadet Rook, Sable Hark said. This is a compliance evaluation, Hark added. It will be quick if you cooperate. Evan did not step inside because stepping inside felt like agreeing. He kept his voice steady because steady was the only refusal the system respected. Where's Sergeant Major Dax? Evan asked. Not required, Hark said. This is medical. Sanaa stepped in, voice clean and sharp, and Evan felt relief he did not want to owe. She spoke with the authority she had earned and dared the room to deny it. I'm a medical cadet, Sanaa said. I demand oversight. You are a cadet, Hark said. Sit down and observe. Evan felt the danger lock into place, clean and polite, and his blood turned hot in a way he did not trust. He kept his feet planted. I'm not entering that module, Evan said. Then we will record refusal, Hark said, and you will be removed for instability. Record it, Evan said, and record that you scheduled a medical evaluation in a training bay at a private hour. Hark's eyes narrowed with interest, and the interest looked like ownership. The voice that followed was almost amused. You are smarter than your patch suggests, Hark said. Evan blinked, and the word patch hit him like a cold slap. He kept his voice sharp enough to cut through the hum. Patch? Evan asked. I did not take your patch. Hark lifted a small device like a receipt, casual and clean. The lie was delivered like administration. It is already on the record that you agreed to monitoring, Hark said. Sanaa went still like a held breath, and Evan felt her anger tighten the air. She spoke carefully, because careful was the only way to survive this. I never saw him sign, Sanaa said. Consent is often administrative, Hark said. Evan felt his blood heat as his system translated administrative into trap. The corridor lights flickered, and the module hummed like it was waking. A panel behind them shifted with a faint click, and the floor tilted just enough to warn. Hark's gaze did not move, because the threat did not need to move. You should step inside, Hark said. The system is active. They armed it, Sanaa whispered. Evan's heart kicked, and the borrowed strength began to rise, unwanted and loud. He grabbed Sanaa's wrist, because the decision had to be faster than the trap. Run, Evan said. They sprinted, and Evan moved too fast, and the corridor blurred into motion and grip. A panel dropped ahead, and Evan vaulted, pulling Sanaa with him. They landed hard on the other side as the floor behind them collapsed, and steel coughed like a throat trying to swallow them. They hit the bay door controls, and the door resisted, then opened with a hiss. They tumbled into the hall, and the bay door slammed shut, sealing darkness and intent behind it. Evan leaned against the wall as the borrowed strength drained away. His hands shook violently, and sweat broke cold across his back. Sanaa caught his shoulder and forced him upright, because upright meant alive. Evan, Sanaa said, stay with me. Evan forced a breath and tried to keep his humor small, because humor was how he stayed human. The words came out rough but true. Not yet, Evan said. Do not let me be funny yet. Sanaa's eyes were hard and bright, and the anger in them looked clean. She said the truth without softening it. They try to end you, Sanaa said. They try to make it look like I broke myself, Evan said. A minute later, the corridor lights steadied, but the air still tasted like a near miss. Footsteps approached with authority, and Sergeant Major Dax appeared with his face tight. Why is Bay 7 active? Dax demanded. Sanaa spoke first, fast and clear, because delay would become denial. Evan stayed upright by force of will and wall. Because someone scheduled an illegal evaluation, Sanaa said, and someone forged consent. Dax stared at them, then at the sealed bay, and Evan saw a calculation in his eyes that did not look friendly. Evan's knees threatened to fold, and he fought that too. Cadet Rook, Dax said, voice lower. What did you just do? I survived, Evan said. Again. The next day, Mara Kestrel visited Evan in the recovery bay, wearing an officer's uniform without decorative trim. The lack of trim made her look honest, or at least tired of polish. I am Lieutenant Director Kestrel, she said. I oversee safety compliance. Evan sat up slightly and winced because pain still had opinions. He kept his voice dry because dry was safer than angry. Then you are busy, Evan said. I am, Kestrel said, but I am more interested in why my training bay ran an unscheduled hour. Sanaa stood by the wall with arms folded, and Kestrel looked at her with a measured stare. The air between them felt like two rule sets colliding. Cadet Vey, Kestrel said. You filed a complaint? I did, Sanaa said. Kestrel looked back at Evan, and the question became a test. Her tone stayed careful, because careful kept careers intact. I watched the bay logs, Kestrel said. They are clean, Too clean. That means someone with access cleaned them, Kestrel added. Evan stared at his hands as fatigue sat deep in his bones. He answered quietly, because quiet carried less risk and more truth. Provost PRYX, Evan said. Or someone under him. Be careful with accusations, Kestrel said. Be careful with safety, Evan said. Because your system is becoming a weapon. Kestrel studied him like she was weighing risk against cost. The next question came out plain, and Evan respected that. What do you want? Kestrel asked. I want to train without being hunted, Evan said. And I want nobody else to fall, because it is convenient. Kestrel nodded slowly, almost reluctant, like agreement was a liability. Evan kept his expression neutral and let the next line land where it landed. That is ambitious, Kestrel said. It is expensive, Evan said. But I hear there are sponsors. Sanaa's mouth twitched, and Kestrel's eyes softened a fraction, then hardened again. The warning that followed sounded honest. You're going to get yourself expelled, Kestrel said. Then I will be an expelled cadet who did not die, Evan said. Kestrel exhaled like a choice being made, and Evan could hear the risk in it. She did not promise comfort, which made her promise real. I will not promise you protection, Kestrel said, but I will promise you oversight. I can assign you to a public evaluation that cannot be hidden, Kestrel added. Evan understood what public meant, and the understanding tasted like steel. Public meant safer, and public meant failure would be loud. We will take it, Sanaa said. You are risking your track, Kestrel said. I am, Sanaa said. That is the point. Kestrel nodded once, then made it real with a timeline that sounded like a drumbeat. The plan became a place, and places were where people got hurt. 3 days, Kestrel said. Central Arena, multi-squad drill, live oversight. No private hours, no hidden bays, Kestrel added. Who will run it? Evan asked. Curriculum architect Slate designed the module, Kestrel said. But I will stand on the floor. Then let us see if the system likes witnesses, Evan said. Sanaa stayed beside him, which mattered more than any promise in a clean room. Evan felt the weight of 3 days settle into his bones. 3 days later, the central arena filled with cadets and instructors, and on paper, it was teamwork under pressure. In practice, it was a stage, and reputations were built there and destroyed there. Evan stood with Squad 9, and Vargo stood with a higher squad, rewarded by hierarchy with better teammates. Provost PRYX sat in. The oversight balcony calm, as ever, and Lyra Quill sat beside him, smiling for the cameras. Juno Slate stood near the arena controls with a tablet, and Lieutenant Director Kestrel stood on the floor, visible and undeniable. Sergeant Major Dax raised his voice, and the rules dropped like a gate closing. Objective is extraction and casualty stabilization, Dax said. Retrieve a core and evacuate through the east gate. Hazards are dynamic, Dax added. If you panic, you lose. The arena lights dimmed, and the floor panels shifted under boots like living geometry. Fog rose thin and cold, and Evan's heart began to beat faster because his body smelled danger early. He tried to breathe slow and stay boring, because boring was his last defense. Then the first hazard hit, and the defense cracked. Gravity pulsed, and a section of floor tilted. A squad to Evan's left stumbled into a barrier, and the cry that followed sounded real. A training barrier had failed, and a jagged edge cut into a thigh. Blood spilled fast, bright and honest, and the crowd gasped as instructor shouted. Dax swore under his breath, and Kestrel moved and signaled medics. Juno Slate tapped her tablet too calm, and Lyra leaned forward watching like this was a demonstration. Evan felt the borrowed strength surge, and he told it no even as his body moved anyway. He sprinted, slid to the cadet, and pressed down fabric with shaking hands. He tore a strip from his own sleeve to bind, messy and urgent because this was not a lesson and not a performance. He did it like a terrified person trying to keep someone from slipping away. Sanaa arrived a second later with the med team, and her voice snapped the moment into order. Evan stumbled backward as the borrowed strength drained again, and his legs went heavy like his bones turned to lead. Move back, Sanaa said. Let us work. Vargo's voice rang out from the fog loud and eager, and the accusation sounded like a prayer for chaos. Evan turned his head, vision wavering, and kept his answer small. Of course Earth is involved, Vargo shouted. He triggers chaos wherever he goes. Shut up, Evan said. Do you think you're a hero? Vargo called. You are a hazard. Evan's hands shook, and he did not chase Vargo, because chasing danger for strength would make him their story. Kestrel's voice cut through the fog like a blade. Prefect Vargo, Kestrel snapped. Return to your lane. Vargo hesitated, then obeyed, irritated, and watched. The drill continued, hazard shifted, and fog thickened as Squad 9 moved cautiously. Evan stayed at the back, not hiding but managing, and management felt like survival. Then the East Gate control failed, and the exit panel went dark. A siren sounded, and it was not a training tone. Dax's eyes widened as he heard the difference in the sound. Stop drill, Dax ordered. Stop drill now. The arena did not stop, and that was the moment the room became something else. Fog thickened, gravity pulses grew irregular, and a floor panel dropped near the center with a sound too heavy to ignore. Evan looked up at the balcony, and PRYX sat perfectly still while Lyra's smile faltered for the first time. Juno Slate stared at her tablet with fingers moving fast, not with panic, with adjustment. Kestrel's face went cold, and her voice on the communications link was clipped and certain. Evan heard the phrase and felt sick at how clear it was. This is not a drill malfunction, Kestrel said. This is an activation. Evan understood with a clarity that made his throat tighten. They made the arena dangerous on purpose, not to train, but to force his system to trigger and justify control. A cadet screamed as the floor shifted under him. Evan's body surged again, offering speed and heat, and Evan hated how eager it was. Evan took a breath and made a decision, because choice was the only thing they could not sponsor. He would not give them a show of dominance. He would give them a show of responsibility. Eject to the rails, Evan shouted. Follow the anchor lights. The squad hesitated because they were used to ignoring him. Sanaa's voice cut and loud and absolute, and the authority in it made people move. Listen to him, Sanaa said. Now. They moved, and Evan sprinted through fog, guiding cadets to stable rails. He grabbed harnesses, hauled people from drops, and kept his orders calm. He moved fast enough to save them and plain enough to deny them spectacle. Then he saw Vargo near a failing panel, and Vargo's confident mask cracked because danger did not respect status. The floor shifted under Vargo's feet, and he slipped as the drop opened like the one that took Valen. Evan's heart kicked as his system offered power, and Evan ran anyway because the choice mattered more than the surge. He grabbed Vargo's harness and yanked hard, and Vargo slammed into Evan's chest with breath knocked out. They hit the ground, and Evan's vision flashed white as the borrowed strength drained like a plug pulled. Evan's hands shook violently, and his muscles seized so hard he could not stand. Vargo stared at him, eyes wide with shock and confusion, and the question came out like a crack. Why? Vargo whispered. Evan forced air into his lungs and kept the answer simple, because simple was harder to twist. The words scraped out, but they were true. Because I do not need you dead to prove you were wrong, Evan said. Kestrel reached them and knelt fast, her voice turning into command that did not ask permission. She looked up toward the balcony and raised her voice, because the building needed to hear it. Medics, Kestrel barked. Now. Provost PRYX, stand down the arena, Kestrel said. Now. PRYX stood slowly, smiling faintly like he anticipated the request. Lyra leaned close and whispered something urgent, and Juno Slate's face remained neutral. Juno's eyes flicked to Evan, and for the first time Evan saw annoyance, not at danger, but at failure to control. Kestrel lifted her comm unit with a hard decision and made it loud enough to become history. I'm calling external oversight, Kestrel said. This is no longer internal. The crowd murmured and shifted into a new fear, because the system slipped and everyone saw the teeth underneath. The arena lights steadied, but the truth did not. 2 hours later, the arena was sealed, and the forum reopened with a different mood. The cameras were still there, but now they were hungry. Provost PRYX stood at the center with Lyra Quill and Juno Slate beside him. Kestrel stood opposite, arms folded, face like stone, and the symmetry felt like a showdown. Evan sat on a bench near the front, wrapped in a blanket, and his hands still shook lightly. Sanaa stood close enough that everyone saw it, and the visibility was its own shield. PRYX spoke smoothly like he could polish any disaster. The explanation arrived ready-made, the words chosen to blur edges. An unexpected cascade occurred, PRYX said. We are reviewing causes. It was not unexpected, Kestrel said. It was initiated. There were commands, Kestrel added. They were issued from authorized access. PRYX's smile tightened, and Lyra stepped in quickly, voice bright as a brochure. The denial sounded practiced, and the practice sounded expensive. That is a serious claim, PRYX said. Our consortium only supports safety, Lyra said. We would never endanger cadets. Kestrel raised a small device, and the object looked too simple for what it carried. Her voice did not bend, because bending would turn evidence into debate. It is evidence, Kestrel said, and it is already transmitted. A hush fell thick and final. Kestrel turned her gaze to Lyra and did not blink. Your recovery team scheduled an illegal evaluation in Base 7, Kestrel said. Your signature appears on the authorization chain. Lyra blinked once, then smiled gently like comfort that tried too hard. The excuse came out soft, as if softness could erase harm. Administrative overlap, Lyra said. Evan laughed short and dry, because he was tired of danger being renamed. He stood slowly, legs trembling, and steadied himself without drama. I'm tired of hearing danger called administrative, Evan said. PRYX looked at him and tried to make him small with tone and position. Evan refused the shrinking by keeping his voice calm. Cadet Rook, PRYX said, you are not in command of this forum. I know, Evan said. That is why you thought you could use me. Murmurs rose, and PRYX's eyes sharpened, but Evan kept going, calm and clear. He did not shout because he did not need to. You wanted Earth to be a lesson, Evan said. A joke, a warning label. And you wanted my body to be a product, Evan added. You are emotional, Lyra said. That is understandable after trauma. Sanaa stepped forward, voice steady and bright, and the room turned toward her like a compass. She did not raise her voice. She raised the truth. He is not emotional, Sanaa said. He is accurate. Lyra's smile froze in place. PRYX lifted a hand to control the room again, but the control looked thinner now. Cadets, PRYX said, do not be misled by dramatic narratives. This center exists to protect you, PRYX added. Evan looked around the room and saw faces change, and the change felt slow and real. He saw fear, curiosity, and something close to shame. You protect the system, Evan said. Not us. PRYX took a slow breath and shifted tactics like a seasoned operator. The question that followed sounded almost reasonable, which made it more dangerous. Then tell me, PRYX said, what is your solution? Evan blinked because the question sounded real, and he answered anyway, because truth was cheaper than silence. He kept it short, because long answers were easier to cut. Witnesses, Evan said. Transparency. Stop letting status decide who gets hurt quietly, Evan added. Juno Slate spoke softly, and the softness tried to turn risk into necessity. Her tone stayed controlled, because control was her language. Training requires controlled risk, Juno said. Without it, we produce fragile cadets. Evan looked at her, and his voice stayed flat. The question landed in the silence like a weight. Controlled by who? Evan asked. And for whose benefit? Juno did not answer, and the silence landed heavy. Kestrel stepped forward and made it law, because law was how you stop polish from rewriting blood. Effective immediately, Base 7 is sealed under external audit, Kestrel said. Arena control access is restricted, and all private evaluations are suspended. PRYX's smile flickered as he lost a piece of the board. Lyra's eyes turned cold for the first time, anger leaking through polish. Cadet Rook, Lyra said quietly, You are making powerful enemies. Evan met her gaze, steady despite shaking. He did not pretend surprise, because surprise was for people who had not lived this long. I already had them, Evan said. Now I just know their names. The cameras drifted closer, smelling a story, and the room felt like it had shifted 1 degree toward truth. The shift was small, but it was enough to make the powerful uncomfortable. That night, Evan sat alone in the empty cafeteria under dim maintenance lights. The station's outer ring glowed faintly beyond the window, and engines hummed far away like a sleeping animal. Sanaa sat across from him without asking, because asking would have made it optional. Evan looked at his broth, plain and unchanged, and felt how little the world cared about speeches. My hands will not stop shaking, Evan said. Your system spent its reserves, Sanaa said. It will recover. Evan stared at her like he needed honesty more than comfort. The question came out quiet, but it held the edge of fear. And if it does not? Evan asked. Sanaa's eyes softened. Her voice stayed practical, because practical was the only kindness the center allowed. The answer did not promise ease, it promised reality. Then we adapt, Sanaa said. That is what survival is. Evan laughed quietly, because the line sounded like a poster, and he hated posters. Sanaa's mouth twitched, and the twitch looked like shared exhaustion. You sound like a poster, Evan said. I hate posters, Sanaa said. They lie. Evan looked out the window and let the bitterness breathe, because bitterness was cheaper than despair. He spoke the thought he had carried since the first joke. Everyone thinks Earth is poor, Evan said. Maybe we are. Poor is not the insult they think it is, Sanaa said. Poor teaches efficiency and stubbornness. Poor teaches you how to keep moving when nobody claps, Sanaa added. Evan swallowed, and the truth hurt in a clean way. He did not feel triumphant, only tired, and maybe that was the most honest outcome. They hated that I did not look impressive, Evan said. They hated that you did not need their approval, Sanaa said. Evan exhaled slowly and let that settle. He felt human, and maybe that was the only victory that mattered. A week later, Squad 9 trained again, with Kestrel on the floor, visible and watching. Dax watched the controls like he wanted to strangle the system with his bare hands. Vargo kept his distance, and he did not apologize, but he stopped laughing. In a place like this, that was change. On the last day of the week, a cadet from a rich world approached Evan in the hall. The cadet hesitated, then spoke with less certainty than before. I thought you were weak, the cadet said. Most people do, Evan said. You saved Vargo, the cadet said. You did not have to. That is the point, Evan said. I did not have to. I chose to. The cadet stood there a moment, then nodded once and walked away quieter. Sanaa met Evan's eyes from the far end of the corridor and stayed visible and unashamed. It said without words, I am here, I chose this. Evan felt the station hum under his feet, and he felt his hands steadying slowly. The borrowed strength might fade, and the shaking might return, but the lesson had already spread through the center like a signal. Earth was not irrelevant. Earth was the place that taught people to survive without permission. Orion Spur still hummed with polished rules and recycled air, and the rich cadets still walked like gravity owed them respect. Paperwork still multiplied like a quiet infection, and cameras still drifted. But something had shifted, and everyone could feel it, even the ones who hated it. Evan Rook walked the corridor with his hands finally steady, not because the system forgave him, but because he stopped asking it to. He learned the truth the hard way, and the truth did not sound heroic. Strength was not the surge. Strength was the choice you made when the surge faded. Across the hall, Sanave caught his eye and stayed where she could be seen. She looked like a promise that could not be erased with a signature. Behind them, doors were sealed and logs were copied, and audits were triggered like alarms that did not need sound. People who lived on status suddenly lived on evidence, and the shift made the air feel different. And that was the quiet miracle of it. Not a new kind of blood and not a new kind of body. A new kind of witness. The galaxy learned something it did not want to admit. Earth was not glamorous and Earth was not rich, but Earth arrived with grit, stubborn decency, and a refusal to let someone fall. Evan Rook did not win by becoming a weapon. He won by staying human. And in a place built to polish people into obedient shapes, that was the most dangerous thing he could do. If you want more stories like this, please like the video and share it with someone who loves hard choices. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next episode, because the system never stops watching.